The stars burned cold in the endless night as Admiral Sarah Chen stared at the tactical display. Red dots marked the positions of 17 dead star systems, 17 civilizations that had been wiped out in less than 10 years, all by the same enemy, the Nexari Collective. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the reports again. The pattern was always the same. The aliens would arrive with their massive war machines, destroy everything in orbit, then land and finish off whatever was left on the ground. No survivors, no prisoners, just empty worlds left behind. "Admiral, we're getting another transmission from Kepler Station," said Lieutenant Torres, her voice shaky. Sarah nodded. Kepler Station was humanity's furthest outpost, 3 months away from Earth. If the Nexari were there, it meant they were coming for humanity's homeworld next. The main screen flickered to life. Colonel Martinez appeared, his face covered in dirt and blood. Behind him, explosions lit up the sky like deadly fireworks. "Admiral Chen, this is our final transmission," Martinez shouted over the sound of battle. "The Nexari machines are everywhere. They're 50 meters tall, maybe bigger. Our weapons barely scratch them." A massive shadow passed over Martinez. He looked up, his face going pale. "Dear God," he whispered. "There are hundreds of them." The transmission cut to static. Sarah closed her eyes. Another human colony was about to die, just like all the others. "What do we know about these machines?" she asked Dr. Webb, her chief military advisor. Dr. Marcus Webb was a short, stocky man who used to be a professional fighter before becoming a military strategist. He pulled up a hologram showing one of the alien war machines. "The colonists call them devastators," he said. "They're biomechanical constructs, part machine and part living tissue. Each one is piloted by a Nexari warrior, who connects directly to the machine's nervous system." The hologram rotated, showing the sleek, insect-like design of the war machine. It had 4 legs that could move in any direction, and arms that ended in weapons that could destroy buildings with single shots. "How many do they usually bring?" Sarah asked. "Based on the attack patterns, we estimate between 200 and 300 per invasion," Webb replied. "They work together like a hive mind. Perfect coordination, no wasted movements, no mistakes." Sarah studied the image. The machine looked deadly and efficient, like something designed by engineers who had forgotten that war was supposed to be messy and unpredictable. "What about weaknesses?" she asked. Webb shook his head. "None that we've found. Their armor is nearly indestructible. Their weapons can punch through our best shields, and they never seem to make tactical errors." Captain Rodriguez, Sarah's tactical officer, leaned forward. "Admiral, I've been studying the attack footage from the other worlds. There's something strange about how they fight." "Strange how?" "They're too perfect," Rodriguez said. "Every movement is calculated. Every attack is planned. They never do anything unexpected or creative. It's like they're following a program." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You think that's a weakness?" "Maybe," Rodriguez said. "But I'm not sure how we could use it." The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed the information. 17 worlds had tried to find weaknesses in the Nexari war machines. 17 worlds had failed. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Based on their travel speed, maybe 6 months before they reach our outer system," Torres replied. 6 months to prepare for an enemy that had never lost a battle. Sarah looked around at her crew. These were good people, trained soldiers who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. But they were facing something beyond anything they had ever imagined. "Send a message to Earth Command," Sarah ordered. "Tell them we need every ship, every weapon, every soldier they can spare, and tell them to start evacuating the civilian populations." "Yes, Admiral," Torres replied. As her crew worked, Sarah stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Nexari fleet was coming. Their war machines were probably being prepared for another easy victory, another world to add to their collection. But Earth wouldn't be like the other worlds. Humans were different. Sarah wasn't sure how yet, but she could feel it in her bones. Humans had something the other species didn't have. The problem was figuring out what that something was before it was too late. Over the next few days, more reports came in from other human colonies. The Nexari were moving fast, destroying everything in their path. Each report was the same story: overwhelming firepower, perfect tactics, and complete annihilation. Dr. Webb spent hours analyzing the combat footage, looking for any advantage they could use. The Nexari fought like machines themselves, precise, efficient, and utterly without mercy. They don't even seem to enjoy it, he muttered during one late-night strategy session. It's like they're just following orders from a computer. Sarah paused. What do you mean? I mean they fight like they're solving a math problem, Webb said. There's no passion, no anger, no fear. They just do what the tactical situation requires and nothing more. And that's bad? Webb thought for a moment. Maybe. When I was fighting in the cage, the most dangerous opponents weren't always the most skilled ones. Sometimes it was the crazy ones, the ones who would do something stupid and desperate that caught you off guard. Sarah nodded slowly. She was starting to understand what Rodriguez had meant about the enemy being too perfect. Doctor, I want you to put together a complete analysis of human military history. Every war, every battle, every tactic we've ever used. Compare it to what we know about the Nexari. That could take weeks, Admiral. Then you better get started, Sarah said, because in 6 months we're going to need every advantage we can get. As Webb left to begin his research, Sarah remained on the bridge, staring out at the stars. 17 civilizations had faced the Nexari and lost. But maybe, just maybe, humans were different enough to change that pattern. She just hoped they would figure out how before Earth became the 18th dead world on the Nexari's list. Dr. Marcus Webb had not slept in 3 days. His office was covered with papers, holographic displays, and empty coffee cups. He had been studying every piece of information they had about the Nexari, comparing it to thousands of years of human warfare. What he found surprised him. Admiral Chen walked into his office and found him staring at a wall covered with battle plans and combat footage. Doctor, you look terrible, she said. Webb turned around, his eyes red from exhaustion but bright with excitement. Admiral, I think I found something. Something important. He gestured to the wall where images of Nexari devastators were displayed next to pictures of human soldiers throughout history. Look at this, he said, pointing to a video of Nexari machines attacking a colony. Watch how they move. Sarah watched as the 50-meter war machines advanced across a battlefield. Their movements were smooth and coordinated. Each machine knew exactly where the others were and what they were doing. They moved like dancers performing a perfect routine. Now watch this, Webb said, switching to footage of human Marines fighting on a different world. The human soldiers moved differently. They scrambled for cover, shouted orders to each other, and adapted to changing situations. When their plan didn't work, they made up new ones on the spot. It looked messy compared to the alien precision. I don't understand, Sarah said. The Nexari look much more organized. Webb grinned. That's exactly the problem. Admiral, the Nexari fight like they're playing chess. Every move is calculated, every strategy is planned in advance. But humans fight like we're in a bar fight. He pulled up more footage, this time showing captured Nexari prisoners being questioned. The aliens were tall and thin, with pale skin and large black eyes. They spoke in monotone voices and showed no emotion. According to the prisoners, the Nexari eliminated individual combat from their society over 500 years ago, Webb explained. They considered it primitive and wasteful. All their warriors train in computer simulations using approved tactics and strategies. Sarah frowned. That sounds like it would make them better soldiers, not worse. You would think so, Webb said. But here's the thing, they've never faced real chaos. They've never had to adapt when everything goes wrong. They've never felt the desperation that makes you do something crazy just to survive. He showed her a graph comparing battle outcomes. Look at this data. Every time the Nexari face an organized military using standard tactics, they win easily. But look what happens when they face guerrilla fighters or irregular forces. The graph showed that while the Nexari still won, their victories took longer and cost them more casualties. The pirates of the Vega system held out for 3 months using hit-and-run tactics, Webb continued. The rebels on Cygnus Prime lasted 2 months by fighting from the ruins of their cities. Every time someone fights dirty, the Nexari struggle. Sarah began to understand. You're saying they can't handle unpredictable opponents. Exactly, Webb said. They're like a championship sports team that's never played against anyone who doesn't follow the rules. They know how to beat every standard play, but they don't know what to do when someone throws the playbook out the window. Admiral Chen thought about this. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. Every war had produced new tactics, new weapons, new ways of killing. Human military doctrine was built on the assumption that the enemy would do unexpected things. What about their technology advantage? She asked. Webb pulled up technical specifications. Their devastators are incredibly advanced, but they're not indestructible. The colonists managed to destroy a few using improvised explosives and heavy weapons. The problem is that most species try to fight the machines head-on, which plays to the Nexari's strengths. He switched to a tactical display showing a human city. But what if we don't fight the way they expect? What if we use the environment against them? What if we make them come to us in places where their size and coordination become disadvantages? Sarah studied the display. You're talking about urban warfare. Among other things, Webb said. Admiral, I've spent the last 3 days studying how humans fight differently from every other species we know about. We're persistence hunters by evolution. We don't give up, we adapt. And when we're cornered, we get vicious. He showed her historical footage of human conflicts. Soldiers fighting in trenches, guerrillas hiding in jungles, civilians defending their homes with whatever weapons they could find. Every other species the Nexari conquered tried to match them strength for strength, technology for technology, Webb said. But that's not how humans fight. When we can't win with strength, we use cunning. When we can't win with technology, we use desperation. Sarah nodded slowly. So how do we use this? Webb spread out a map of Earth. We don't meet them in open battle where they can use their coordination advantage. We draw them into our cities, into our streets, into places where every fight becomes personal and chaotic. He pointed to different locations on the map. We set up ambushes in subway tunnels. We fight from rooftops and sewers. We use the ruins of destroyed buildings as weapons. We make every Nexari warrior face the kind of desperate, dirty fighting that their species forgot how to handle. Admiral Chen looked at the plan. It was risky and would cost thousands of human lives. But it was also their best chance of survival. There's one more thing, Webb said quietly. I think the Nexari have a psychological weakness. What do you mean? They've been winning for so long that they expect to win, he explained. Their whole society is built on the idea that they're superior to everyone else. But humans, we're used to being the underdogs. We expect fights to be hard and dirty and unfair. He showed her psychological profiles of captured Nexari. They show signs of stress when things don't go according to plan. They've never faced an enemy that refused to break, that kept fighting even when defeat seemed certain. Sarah understood. The Nexari were like bullies who had never been punched back. They didn't know how to handle real resistance. Start working on detailed plans, she ordered. I want every major city prepared for urban combat. And Doctor, good work. As Webb began preparing for the battle ahead, neither he nor Admiral Chen knew that their analysis was more accurate than they had dared hope. The Nexari were indeed unprepared for the kind of warfare that humans had been perfecting for millennia. They were about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object with anger issues. The Nexari fleet emerged from hyperspace like a cloud of death. 300 Devastator war machines hung in their transport ships, ready to add Earth to their collection of conquered worlds. Architect Prime Vexhai stood in the command center of his flagship, studying the blue and green planet below. His tall, pale form was connected to the ship's systems through neural cables that ran along his spine. Through these connections, he could feel the thoughts and emotions of every Nexari warrior in the fleet. They felt confident. This would be another easy victory. Begin orbital bombardment of military installations, Vexhai ordered in his calm, emotionless voice. The first wave of energy beams lanced down from the Nexari ships. Military bases vanished in brilliant flashes of light. Orbital defense platforms were destroyed before they could fire a single shot. Within hours, Earth's space-based defenses were gone. But something was different about this conquest. The humans were not fleeing in panic like other species had done. Instead of crowding into evacuation ships, they were moving deeper into their cities. Instead of surrendering, they seemed to be preparing to fight. Curious, Vexhai murmured. Deploy the first wave of devastators to the largest population center. Standard pacification protocol. 50 war machines descended toward Sydney, Australia. Each devastator was 50 meters of living metal and synthetic flesh, piloted by a Nexari warrior whose mind was linked directly to the machine's weapons and sensors. The machines landed in the city's outskirts and began their advance. Their sensors detected human military forces scattered throughout the urban area, but the formations looked chaotic and disorganized compared to what they usually faced. The devastators moved forward in perfect formation, their massive feet crushing abandoned cars and streetlights. Their weapons charged up, ready to eliminate any resistance they encountered. That's when the humans attacked. The first explosion came from a subway tunnel beneath the lead Devastator's feet. The machine stumbled as the street collapsed, and immediately more explosions erupted from windows and rooftops all around the formation. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez crouched in the ruins of an office building, watching through her rifle scope as her improvised bombs struck the alien machines. The explosions barely scratched their armor, but they did something more important. They broke up the perfect formation. "All units, hit-and-run tactics," she shouted into her radio. "Don't try to kill them, just make them mad." Human soldiers opened fire from a dozen different positions. Rocket-propelled grenades struck the Devastators from multiple angles. Sniper fire pinged off their armored heads. The attacks did little damage, but they forced the machines to spread out and take cover. For the first time in their military careers, the Nexari pilots felt confusion. This was not how battles were supposed to go. The humans should have formed defensive lines that could be systematically destroyed. Instead, they were everywhere and nowhere, striking from unexpected angles and then disappearing into the urban maze. One Devastator turned toward a building where muzzle flashes had appeared, only to have that building explode in its face. The humans had rigged their own structures with explosives, turning their city into a giant trap. Private Jake Morrison huddled in the basement of a collapsed shopping mall with his 5-man squad. Above them, the footsteps of a Devastator shook dust from the ceiling. "Sarge, we're trapped," whispered Corporal Liu. "That thing's right on top of us." Sergeant Williams looked at the demolition charges they had left. Enough to bring down what remained of the building, but it would kill them all in the process. "You boys got somewhere else to be?" Williams asked with a grim smile. The squad looked at each other. They all knew what he meant. They could surrender and hope the aliens would take prisoners, or they could make the bastards pay for every meter of ground. "Hell no, Sarge," Morrison said. "Let's show these freaks how humans die." Williams triggered the charges. The explosion brought down 3 stories of concrete and steel directly onto the Devastator above them. The War Machine's pilot felt genuine shock as his nearly indestructible machine was crushed under thousands of tons of debris. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Humans who should have been running were instead fighting with a ferocity that the Nexari had never encountered. When their weapons failed, they used improvised explosives. When their positions were overrun, they fell back to new positions and kept fighting. Captain Lisa Zhang piloted her damaged mech through the burning streets of Sydney's downtown district. Her machine was a third the size of the Devastators and held together with spare parts and determination. She had lost contact with command an hour ago, but she kept fighting anyway. A Devastator appeared around a corner, its weapons already charging. Zhang's mech was too damaged to win a direct confrontation, but she didn't try to retreat. Instead, she charged straight at the alien machine. "For Earth," she screamed, firing everything she had. Her missiles struck the Devastator's torso just as she rammed into it at full speed. Both machines went down in a tangle of metal and sparks. The alien pilot tried to stand, but Zhang had wrapped her mech's arms around his machine's main weapon array. Even as her cockpit filled with smoke, she held on, preventing the Devastator from bringing its guns to bear. The alien machine was stronger, but Zhang refused to let go. Her mech's power core was damaged and leaking radiation, but she used that to her advantage. She triggered a deliberate overload, turning her machine into a bomb. The explosion left a crater in the street and ended both pilots, but it also sent a message to every Nexari warrior watching. These humans would not break. As the day wore on, the pattern continued. The Devastators destroyed buildings and killed hundreds of humans, but they could not pacify the city. Every time they thought they had secured an area, new attacks came from underground tunnels or hidden bunkers. The Nexari had brought their standard number of war machines for a planetary conquest, but they were taking casualties at a rate they had never experienced. Worse, their perfect coordination was breaking down as individual pilots began to feel something their species had not experienced in centuries: fear. Vexhai watched the battle reports with growing concern. His forces should have secured the city within hours, but human resistance was actually increasing as the day progressed. More disturbing, his warriors were beginning to exhibit signs of stress and confusion. "Deploy additional forces," he ordered. "Triple the standard assault strength." But even as more Devastators descended toward Earth's cities, Vexhai felt a troubling emotion creeping into his perfectly ordered mind. For the first time in his life, he was not certain of victory. On the ground, Admiral Chen coordinated the defense from a bunker deep beneath the Australian continent. The reports were grim. They were losing the battle and taking heavy casualties. But something else was coming through in the communications from the front lines. The Nexari were making mistakes, small ones at first, but growing larger as the battle continued. Their perfect formations were becoming ragged. Their calculated advances were becoming cautious and hesitant. For the first time in the war, the unstoppable alien invaders were showing signs of uncertainty. The real fight was just beginning. The city of Sydney was no longer recognizable. 3 days of fighting had turned it into a hellscape of burning buildings, collapsed streets, and twisted metal. But the humans were still fighting. Sergeant David Kim crouched in the ruins of what used to be a bank, watching a group of devastators move through the smoke-filled street below. His squad had been reduced from 12 men to 4, but they had destroyed 6 of the alien war machines in return. "Look at them," whispered Private Chen, pointing at the devastators. "They're different now," Kim nodded. The alien machines were no longer moving in perfect formation. Instead, they advanced cautiously, constantly looking over their shoulders and checking dark corners. Their movements had become hesitant and defensive. The Nexari were learning to feel fear. "Remember, we're not trying to win this fight," Kim said to his remaining men. "We're teaching these bastards that every step forward costs them blood." He signaled to the others and they opened fire from concealed positions. The devastators immediately took cover, their pilots no longer confident in their machine's invulnerability. Kim smiled grimly and led his squad through a prepared escape route as the aliens returned fire at empty buildings. This was how humans fought, not to win grand battles, but to make every victory so expensive that the enemy would eventually give up. Across the city, similar scenes were playing out. Human fighters had learned to use the urban environment to their advantage. They fought from sewers, subway tunnels, and the skeletal remains of skyscrapers. When the aliens destroyed one position, the humans simply moved to another. Private Maria Santos climbed through the air ducts of a partially collapsed office tower, carrying a backpack full of improvised explosives. Below her, she could hear the heavy footsteps of a devastator searching the building. Santos had been a construction worker before the war. She knew every inch of the city's infrastructure, every weak point in its buildings. That knowledge made her one of the most dangerous humans on Earth. She found the structural support beam she was looking for and began attaching her charges. The alien machine below was trying to flush out human fighters by systematically destroying each floor of the building. What it didn't know was that Santos was about to bring the entire structure down on its head. As she worked, Santos thought about her daughter who had been evacuated to the underground shelters. She thought about all the human children hiding in the darkness below, depending on soldiers like her to keep the monsters at bay. "This is for Emma," she whispered and triggered the charges. The building collapsed in a thunderous roar, burying the devastator under tons of concrete and steel. Santos died in the collapse, but she had eliminated another of the seemingly invincible war machines. Her sacrifice was typical of how humans were fighting. They didn't expect to survive the battle. They just expected to make the aliens pay for every meter of ground. Captain Rodriguez led a squad of damaged mechs through the ruins of the financial district. His machines were patched together with spare parts and held together by determination. They looked like junk compared to the elegant devastators, but they had one advantage the aliens lacked. Their pilots were willing to die. "Contact front," shouted Lieutenant Walsh over the radio. 3 devastators advancing down Market Street. Rodriguez studied his tactical display. His 4 mechs were outnumbered and outgunned. In a fair fight, they would be destroyed in minutes. But Rodriguez had no intention of fighting fair. "Davis, take your mech into that parking garage and set up an ambush," he ordered. "Walsh, get on that overpass and wait for my signal. Morrison, you're with me." The human mechs scattered to their positions as the devastators approached. The alien machines moved carefully now, their sensors constantly scanning for threats. Their pilots had learned to respect human cunning, even if they didn't understand it. Rodriguez waited until the lead devastator was directly below the overpass where Walsh was hiding. "Now!" he shouted. Walsh's mech leaped from the overpass, landing directly on top of the lead devastator. Both machines crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and weapons. At the same time, Davis opened fire from the parking garage while Rodriguez and Morrison attacked from the flanks. The Nexari pilots found themselves surrounded and under attack from multiple directions. Their perfect coordination broke down as each pilot tried to respond to different threats. In the confusion, They began firing at each other's positions. When the battle ended 5 minutes later, all 4 human mechs had been destroyed, but they had taken all 3 Devastators with them, and their pilots had died knowing they had made the enemy pay. In his command ship orbiting Earth, Architect Prime Vexhai studied the battle reports with growing alarm. His forces had destroyed most of the human military units, but the resistance was actually getting stronger. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Nexari had faced before. Instead of trying to preserve their forces, they seemed determined to inflict maximum casualties regardless of the cost to themselves. More disturbing were the psychological reports from his pilots. Many were showing signs of combat stress, something unknown in Nexari society. Some were requesting to be withdrawn from battle, claiming their neural links were being affected by emotional contamination from the humans they fought. "Sir, we're receiving reports of human attacks in 17 different cities," reported his aide. "Our forces are spread thin trying to respond to all of them." Vexhai's emotionless face showed a flicker of uncertainty. "How is this possible? We destroyed their central command structure on the first day." "The humans appear to be fighting without central coordination," the aide replied. "Each group is making its own decisions about when and where to attack." This was incomprehensible to the Nexari mind. How could a military force function without orders from above? How could soldiers fight effectively when they couldn't communicate with their commanders? But the humans were proving that chaos could be just as effective as order, if the warriors were willing to take initiative and make their own decisions. "Sir, we're also receiving disturbing reports about human behavior in combat," the aide continued. "Our pilots report that humans continue fighting even when mortally wounded. Some have been observed laughing while dying." Vexhai felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine confusion. What kind of species found humor in its own destruction? "Increase orbital bombardment," he ordered. "If we cannot pacify them with ground forces, we will destroy their cities from space." But even as he gave the order, Vexhai knew it would not be enough. The humans had already shown they could fight from underground tunnels and subway systems. Destroying the surface would only force them deeper, where the Devastators would be even less effective. For the first time in his long military career, Vexhai began to wonder if the Nexari had bitten off more than they could chew. On the surface, the human fighters continued their desperate battle. They knew they were losing. Their cities were in ruins and their forces were being systematically destroyed. But they also knew something the aliens didn't understand. Every hour the Nexari spent fighting on Earth was an hour they weren't conquering other worlds. Every Devastator destroyed was one that couldn't be used against other human colonies. Even if Earth fell, the cost of victory would be so high that other species might find the courage to resist. The humans were not just fighting for their own world. They were fighting to prove that the Nexari were not invincible, that they could bleed and die like any other enemy. And as the battle raged on, both sides began to realize that this was no longer just a conquest. It had become something far more primitive and personal. It had become a hunt. 2 weeks after the invasion began, Admiral Sarah Chen climbed out of her underground bunker to see what remained of her world. The surface was a nightmare of smoking ruins and twisted metal, but somehow impossibly humans were still fighting. She could hear the sound of gunfire echoing through the destroyed streets. Somewhere in the rubble, human soldiers were still making the aliens pay for every victory. Chen's command staff had been reduced to a handful of officers operating from hidden bunkers scattered across the continent. Official military command had broken down days ago, but the fighting continued anyway. Individual soldiers and small units had taken it upon themselves to keep resisting, even without orders from above. "Admiral, we're getting reports from around the globe," said Captain Rodriguez, looking up from a salvaged radio. "The pattern is the same everywhere. Our forces are nearly destroyed, but the Nexari advance has slowed to a crawl." Chen nodded. She had seen the intelligence reports. The aliens were winning, but they were winning like a man trying to swim through quicksand. Every meter forward cost them time, resources, and most importantly, confidence. "What's our current casualty count?" she asked. Rodriguez's face was grim. "We've lost about 70% of our military forces. But Admiral, we've also destroyed nearly 40% of their Devastators." Chen felt a grim satisfaction. No world in the history of the Nexari expansion had ever inflicted such losses on the invaders. The aliens had expected easy conquest, not a grinding war of attrition. "Any word from the orbital battle?" she asked. The Nexari are still in control of space, but they've had to bring down additional ships to replace their ground forces, Rodriguez reported. Our intelligence suggests they're having to pull units from other conquests to maintain their strength here. That was exactly what Chen had hoped for. Even if Earth fell, the cost would be so high that it would disrupt Nexari expansion across the galaxy. Other species would see that the invaders could be hurt, could be made to bleed. An explosion in the distance reminded them that the battle was still raging. Chen picked up her rifle and checked the ammunition count. "Where are we needed most?" she asked. Rodriguez pointed toward the city center, where pillars of smoke rose into the gray sky. Sergeant Kim's group is making a final stand in the old subway system. They've been holding that position for 3 days. Chen began walking toward the sound of battle. If humans were going to make their last stand, she wanted to be there with them. In the depths of the subway tunnels beneath the city, Sergeant David Kim was down to his last magazine. His squad had been reduced to 8 soldiers, but they had turned the underground maze into a killing ground for the Nexari war machines. The aliens kept sending devastators into the tunnels, but the tight spaces negated their size advantage. The humans could attack from side passages and maintenance shafts, then disappear before the massive machines could respond. "Sarge, I'm hearing movement in Tunnel 7, whispered Corporal Martinez. Kim nodded and signaled for his team to take positions. They had learned to fight like wolves, using pack tactics to bring down prey much larger than themselves. The Devastator appeared around a corner, its sensors sweeping the tunnel for human fighters. But Kim's squad had learned to mask their heat signatures and move silently through the darkness. The alien machine advanced cautiously, its pilot nervous about the enclosed space. That nervousness was a victory in itself. The supposedly invincible Nexari were now afraid of humans. Kim waited until the Devastator was directly below a maintenance shaft, then dropped a homemade bomb directly onto its head. The explosion damaged the machine's sensors and gave his squad the opening they needed. Human soldiers appeared from hidden positions all along the tunnel, firing everything they had at the blinded war machine. The Devastator tried to respond, but its weapons were too large for the confined space. Its pilot made the mistake of trying to back up, right into another prepared ambush. When the smoke cleared, another Devastator had been destroyed. Kim's squad melted back into the tunnels, already preparing for the next attack. High above the battle, Architect Prime Vexhai stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense to his ordered mind. His forces controlled most of Earth's surface, but the humans simply would not accept defeat. "Sir, we're receiving another request for reinforcements from the surface commanders," his aide reported. Vexhai looked at the deployment roster. He had already committed twice the normal number of war machines to this conquest, and still the resistance continued. "How is this possible?" he asked. "We have destroyed their military infrastructure. We have eliminated their command structure. Why do they continue fighting?" The aide consulted his datapad. "Our field commanders report that the humans appear to be operating without central authority. Individual soldiers are making tactical decisions on their own initiative." This was beyond Vexhai's comprehension. How could an army function when every soldier was acting independently? It violated every principle of military organization that the Nexari understood. "Sir, there's something else," the aide continued nervously. "Our pilots are reporting unusual psychological effects from extended ground combat. Many are requesting immediate rotation back to the ships." Vexhai felt alarm course through his neural links. Nexari warriors were bred for emotional stability. They should not be affected by mere combat stress. "What kind of effects?" "Nightmares, sir. Paranoia. Some report seeing human faces in their sleep. Our medical staff believes prolonged exposure to human combat tactics may be causing neural damage." Vexhai was silent for a long moment. The humans were not just resisting conquest, they were somehow infecting his warriors with their chaotic mindset. "Sir, we're also receiving reports from other Nexari fleets. The conquest of the Rigel colonies has been delayed because we had to divert ships here. The Centauri expansion has been put on hold. That was the final straw. This single world was disrupting the entire Nexari expansion across this sector of the galaxy. Prepare the planet-killer weapons, Vexhai ordered. His aide looked shocked. Sir, that would make the world uninhabitable. We would gain no resources from its conquest. Then we gain nothing, Vexhai replied. But we end this madness. As the order went out to prepare Earth's destruction, Admiral Chen finally reached the subway tunnels where Kim's squad was making their stand. She found the sergeant sitting in the darkness, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. "Admiral," Kim said, not looking up from his weapon. "Come to see how the other half dies?" Chen sat down beside him in the rubble. "Actually, I came to die with you." Kim looked at her with surprise. "Admiral, you should be coordinating the evacuation of civilians, not—" "The evacuation is complete," Chen interrupted. "Everyone who could get to the shelters is already there. Now it's just us and them." She looked around at the small group of soldiers who had chosen to make their final stand in the darkness beneath the city. "You know what's funny?" she said. "The aliens still don't understand what they're fighting." Kim raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "They think they're conquering Earth," Chen explained. "But they're not. They're learning what it means to hunt humans in our own territory, and we're teaching them that even if they win, they'll never be the same afterward." As if summoned by her words, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Another devastator was coming, drawn by the heat signatures of the human fighters. Chen checked her rifle and moved to a firing position. "Sergeant, how many of those things have you killed down here?" 12, Kim replied. 13 if we count the one that got stuck in the flooded section. Chen smiled. "Let's make it 14. The Devastator appeared at the end of the tunnel, its weapons already charging. But something was different about this one. Its movements were jerky and uncertain, and its pilot seemed reluctant to advance into the darkness where humans waited. That hesitation was all the opening the humans needed. The final battle in the tunnels lasted only minutes, but when it ended, both sides had learned something important. The Nexari learned that some enemies could not be conquered, only killed, and even in death, humans could teach their conquerors to fear. The humans learned that sometimes the most important victory was not winning, but making sure the enemy remembered the cost of fighting them. As Vexhi's planet-killer weapons charged up in the darkness of space, his neural links carried a message across the Nexari fleet, a warning that would spread to every corner of their empire. Avoid the third planet of Sol. The creatures there do not fight to conquer. They fight because they are apex predators and war is their natural state. Even in defeat, they make their enemies into something less than they were before. The warning would save countless Nexari lives in the years to come, as fleet after fleet chose to avoid human-occupied worlds rather than face the creatures that had turned conquest into a nightmare. Earth burned, but humanity had taught the galaxy's greatest predators what it meant to be prey.